Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of A Girl in the Product World. I'm your host, Aamna, and today I'm joined with a very, very special guest, Raees. So, Raees is the founder of the platform Ummazing, which is a Muslim-friendly platform enabling you to have access to all kinds of businesses when shopping around. It's an idea that started in his bedroom, and the platform now sees 5,000 users a month, which is amazing. Raees is also a strategy analyst at IWS who are transforming the water treatment landscape. He's also a University of Leicester alumni, graduating in economics. He's also been a freelance DJ. Let's meet him. Raees, hello.
Salam, thank you for having me.
Walaikum salam. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, not too bad. All good on my side. Really, really excited to be on here. You've had some fantastic episodes, so really, really honoured to be one of those episodes moving forward.
Oh, thank you. The pleasure really is all mine. And I've been following your journey and I absolutely love what you do and how it's just changing the landscape. And there's so many different elements to it, which I'm so excited to get into. So, shall we get into it?
Definitely, thank you.
Amazing. So, right, please, in your own words, could you tell the audience a bit about yourself and about Amazing and how it came about?
Yeah, a little bit about myself. I come from a mixed race background. My mother's a revert. My father was born Muslim. I come from a mixed race background, so Indian, Caribbean, and English. And growing up, I grew up in a very non-Muslim community. At least it was the case when growing up. To go to the mosque to get halal meat for me was the normal amount of time, 45 minutes, whatever it was. But then finding out the experience when I moved to Uni of Leicester or Leicester as a city, everything being on your doorstep, Muslims everywhere, really, really good cohesion, told me that even, an hour and a half down the M1, things are really different. So for me, it really, really gave me an understanding that I don't need to be the only person experiencing this growing up. We can certainly create an ecosystem that brings together Muslims as a whole. In the early days, I really didn't know what that was going to look like. And as well, coming up with the name Amazing, got very lucky in grabbing that domain for 99p. I can't take total credit for that. My brother will be hearing this, so he'll know that that was his idea. But yeah, a little bit about myself. I come from a family business, so the family business that you mentioned there is IWS. It's taught me everything I know today. I work as what we say is a strategy analyst, but I honestly couldn't tell you what I do on a day-to-day basis. A little bit of everything, and I think that in and of itself has helped me have the right mindset to be able to run something like Amazing, because you've got to wear so many different hats, roll your sleeves up, so to speak, and if you've got a target, just make it happen. So IWS continues to teach me everything that I know in terms of having the confidence to run our own business. And I don't come from a technology background. That's something I'd like to make very, very clear to any listeners that are thinking about getting into tech. I don't myself. I've just been very, very fortunate to build a team around myself that know really, really good sort of techniques in what they do. They're very, very fantastic at what they do. And I'm just lucky to be surrounded by them to build what we're doing.
That's amazing. And I want to come back to that later because I've spoken to a few people on the podcast now, most recently Jamie, who runs a food waste app called Too Good to Go, and he also wasn't from a tech background. And it's a bit of a pattern that I'm noticing, and that we'll get into that later. But it's a very interesting point there, right? So you've kind of touched on why this was needed for the Muslim community. Could you just tell us a little bit about why it's such a big deal? Why is this needed for Muslims specifically? What's the big deal there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to break that question down is to look at it two ways. It's to look at it as the origin of why I came to come up with the idea. And when I say it's not a novel idea, it's just I happen to be the one, or that my team, shall I say, happen to be the one screaming the loudest about it. But what I think is a really, really good testament to the fact that this is something that our community requires is it's not the first time it's been attempted. So growing up, as I think I might have mentioned previously, I grew up in a non-Muslim area, and more specifically, a Jewish community. So most of the people that I was surrounded with growing up came from that particular community. Now, one thing that I can say that was really admirable as a takeaway from the Jewish community was their ability to keep circular economy, keep the business within their own community, keep business local, and really hold each other accountable for the work that they were doing. Almost in the sense of they were building fortune on top of the relationships that they had. And it wasn't necessarily that they were giving it to the person most qualified, although obviously that's very helpful. They were giving it to the next person to give them a chance of getting to the next stage in maybe their own career or their own development. And, you know, I would always hear so and so would know that next person who was the supplier. There was never a time when they had to go out and look for what they were looking to find. So when it came to looking at my own community, I was, alhamdulillah, I was raised in a way where Islam was still very centric to myself without having, let's say, an immediate community available to me. But certainly when I got to Uni of Leicester, the whole game changed in terms of understanding what the Muslim community can look like and can be. Anyone that knows Leicester will understand that the Muslim community is not only huge and significant, but it's really well integrated. So what I found that was really interesting was people that were serving for, I say Muslim friendly, not necessarily halal, but Muslim friendly, were not just Muslim themselves. So we would expect them to be, Muslim run, and that's great. That is typically what we're finding. However, what we were also interested by was the fact that non-Muslims were going the extra mile to cater for our community, which I thought was really cool. So you fast forward 3 years, and I do my economics degree, and I get back to where I live, and it's pretty anticlimactic. Don't get me wrong. It's evolved in the years that I've not been there, but it's not quite what I've experienced. I've been shown everything, and now I've been given back to where I really think there's an area of improvement. So for me, what it was about was finding a solution so that someone out there like myself doesn't need to feel the same way. But very quickly, it became more than that, because when I break it down into three simple things that we can provide for consumers, we can provide accessibility. So if you're in the same boat as myself, you could be in the middle of Devon, like really no access to Muslim friendly services, but we can still provide you something across the internet, for example. But also, if you're in a high demographic area, let's say Leicester as an example, East London, Birmingham, whatever it is, just because they're on your doorstep doesn't necessarily mean they are the right person or provider for you. So it's about choice. And for me, that's quite important as well. And the next thing, or the final thing that I would say is really important for consumers, and why we found we're solving the problem here, is transparency. When you go on Google for certain things, let's take halal holidays as an example. Halal holidays being the term we're using here. If you go to, I'm going to Austria hopefully in November, right? If you go to Austria, do I know what's out there? Well, we'll go to TikTok and we'll find it now. Back then, it wasn't so easy, but TikTok is a good example. But what we need is an ecosystem where we've got honest reviews from people that we can trust, which are Muslims, because they represent our experience. And for me, what I don't want to have is, for example, Barry saying, drink is really cheap here, because it doesn't represent what requirements I'm looking for, or the community. So TikTok's gone a long way to help that. But the reason we go on TikTok is because they're honest reviews from the community that we can resonate with. So coming back to your question, the reason we believe that there was a need for something like this was we wanted to provide a solution that not only solved the choice, the accessibility, and the transparency side of things, from a business point of view, unlocking the 4.1 or the 5 million Muslims that are in the UK at the moment, and inshallah the rest of the world, but also keeping that pound within our own community. As much as I mentioned there were suppliers that were not Muslim, and that's why we use the word Muslim friendly. We want to reward those that go the extra mile, whether you be Muslim or non-Muslim. But the point is, we have to champion our consumer needs within our community. And if we can keep that pound, so that when I spend my pound with you, you provide me with a stellar service, brilliant. But then you can go and invest in your business, make that better, get more business from other people, and keep that pound circulating within our own economy. If we can get a fraction to what I've experienced that other communities do, I believe united, we can do much better and make much more informed decisions at a higher level that can impact our community for a more positive way.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, and you're absolutely right. We've got to have that united community going, because seen, like you've seen in the Jewish community, I've seen it in, where I am. There's a huge Sikh community, and it's exactly the same thing. Everyone knows everyone. You know who to go to, whether you need building work or like whatever it might be. They know someone. But something that I've also seen come out of it is they've got so much to give because they're keeping that pound within their community.
Yeah,
So, like for example, I see a lot of charity work happening because they just do it together. And that's something I have to admit, it's something I like to see more from the Muslim community. And I think what you're doing is heading towards that. But there
yeah,
is definitely a long way
yeah.
to go, right?
Yeah, I mean, just on that point that you mentioned there about charity, I mean, the beautiful thing about Islam inherently and foundationally is, depending on what we're earning, we give zakat of a certain percentage, and the more you earn, clearly, therefore, the more zakat you give.
Yeah.
Now, very simple maths would suggest that if we do better because we help each other do better, then we can give more, and it
Yeah.
is incumbent upon us to want to do that. Now,
Yeah.
yes, potentially it's idealistic at this very moment to hope that we can get to that point. But personally, in my opinion, unless someone starts that ball rolling to provide a community such as this, I don't think we will get to that position quick enough. I want to do that within our lifetime. For me, what we're building is not about profit, it's not about EBITDA, it's not about valuations, it's about legacy. It's about what I can say on the last day without making it too deep, what my right hand can testify for. And
Yeah.
I'd love for it to be something really dynamic that affects everyone's life and impacts in a positive way so that everyone that spends also gets that reward, inshallah.
Yeah. Amazing. Love it. Now we're going to go back to something that we spoke about at the beginning of our conversation, because about that whole, you don't come from a techie background, but you've done something which is so embedded within technology, and I find that really, really interesting. And your career has been quite different as well. So how did you actually get started, and what would your advice be to anyone who's in the same boat as you, where they don't have a technical background, they haven't done a technical degree? How would they go and pursue something to then reach the masses using technology?
Brilliant. That's an excellent question, Amina, because for me, I want to make it so categorically clear to anyone that's listening. Because I think if someone had told me this earlier, I know I'm 26 now, I might have done this 2 years earlier because I sat on this for way too long. But do not be worried by the fact you know nothing about technology, about what tech stack to use, or whether you're a front end or back end. I couldn't even tell you what that means today, if I'm being totally honest, right? So the point is, if you've got a great idea, that's what you need to start off with foundationally, and you need to be really, really committed to the problem. I know a lot of people say that you've got to be obsessed with the problem, and for me, that is the most important thing. Now, if tech happens to be the solution that you're looking to do, there are so many resources out there that can allow us to achieve what we're looking to do. So, just to make this easier and give a little bit of context, I'll actually give you the story of how I got to where I got to. So, I think I came up with the idea, it's what, 2023 now. So came up with the idea around 2018, 2019. I did nothing with it for ages, right? I fiddled around with business plans, 30-page business plans, thinking I was gonna, change the world. And at first it was a super app, so it was gonna do everything. And I pitched it Dragon's Den style in my living room, and my mum was out, Deborah Meaden style, probably for good reason. And the first thing I did was I Googled to find app developers because that's what I thought I needed to do. I went all the way to Yorkshire, just to give you an understanding. I now live in Watford, so that was about 3.5 hours to go to Yorkshire because these guys said that they could do it all. And I got there and they gave me a quote of £128,000 just for the build, right? That was for the build of the app, right? And these guys said they'll build it, they'll get it to where I need to get it to. It'll include UI, UX, so user interface, user experience for anyone that doesn't know. And then obviously you've got the build of running the business, which for me I put to a point of rounding it up to £500,000. And I said to myself, well, at that point I must have been like 21, 22. But I don't know how on earth I'm going to do this, but I am passionate enough to do it. So I started raising funds. I actually started raising funds, and it was going well. And I was pretty slow on the whole process. I made the business plan. That was like 30 pages, and it took forever. And eventually, COVID hit. I think we got to COVID. Let's just fast forward to COVID. We got there, and it stopped everything for me. IWS, the current company, the family business, needed the attention. That's what we were focusing on. And it meant that I had to sit on the idea for some time. So it meant I couldn't just go and splurge £128,000 to go and get an app made. So handed all back the money because I hadn't obviously spent it, thank God. And the point was, what do I now do with this idea? So I thought to myself very simply, what can I do from my bedroom? What can I teach myself to do? And it was build a website. Start with one idea, part of the super app, which was the marketplace. And how can I build it? First thing to come up on YouTube is a WordPress marketplace using plugins like Elementor and I think it was Dukan, some company in Bangladesh. Fantastic, by the way. They really got us over the line. And I've spent hours and hours and hours doing the most simple stuff like aligning a margin, doing the padding, trying to make it look beautiful when really that's not what I should have been focusing on. And I'll be honest, eventually we said to ourselves, this is taking way too long. And I say we, that was probably me and now my wife saying this is taking way too much of my time. And eventually I put out a tweet that said, does anyone know a graphic designer? And lo and behold, someone that my wife went to school with that was from Leicester, not Muslim, called Emily. She's fantastic. She came in and designed Ummazing as the first sort of template that we had. And that gave us enough to work with. I genuinely built that WordPress website. I still wouldn't know how I did that. But it was just through pure grit and determination to get it there. And that gave us what I now know is called an MVP, a minimum viable product, to get out there and test it. So we shouted from the hilltops and from the rooftops to say, we're amazing. This is what we've got. This is what we're building. And we were saying we were so much better than we were. We were really bad. That platform looked really, really naff. It didn't do anything it said it should do. The onboarding was really clunky and it was not in our control because it was off the shelf software. So fast forward a little bit, I get to a point where that pain point is so much. We get like 200, 300, 400 businesses on there and it's free. We're testing it. It's not like there's that much friction other than signing up. That was pretty difficult. So we get to the point now where we say to ourselves, look, the software we've got is just not doing it. We're going to start, irritating people in terms of their user experience. And then I went back to my uni experience for who do I know that knows how to code and program and develop. And I thought, who was on a computer science course? And I knew a guy called Zamir. And Zamir, I called up, and bless him, he helped for free. He just literally did everything for us because he liked what we were doing. Then I said to Zamir, right, we want to maybe pivot this into something a little bit more, commercial. Because right now we're doing everything for free. There's no commission taken because that's not going to change the world either. Is there something that we can do that's going to really, really help our platform take off a little bit more? He said, right, I know a guy called Raees. I think, he said to me, I think you might remember him. And I did. I remember Raees. And said, look, let's get a call on and see what he can do. And what happened was, Raees and Zam said, look, we'll help you get to a certain point, but you got to pay us to get there because it was just a project. At that point, it was just a project. I didn't, in my heart, believe that anyone would want equity in what the hell we were building. Enough to sacrifice an invoice value, right? I genuinely it did not cross my mind because what we had built was so messy, so clunky, it was not going to be worth anyone saying, yeah, I'm interested. But what I forgot was the concept and the mission of what we were building. And there was more to it, the brand behind it. So when they started building, I said to myself, I've run out of money now because I'm doing this as a side thing. Let's see what happens. I've already got my parents to put in as much as they can, without trying to take a mick. And I just said to them, look, if I was to offer, and before I could say anything, they said to me, Raees, we'd be interested in having a conversation around being involved in this more full time, rather than taking an invoice. Let's not make this transactional. Can we be part of the team? And toing and froing, we got to an equity structure that we were happy with, and then they became part of the full team. So just for your listeners, and to go back to that question, to recap, we got to a point of I know nothing to this day. I know nothing about tech, right? I don't need to know that much about tech because I've got a great team around me. But I had an idea. All I needed was the apparatus to make that idea happen. And it doesn't need to cost loads. It doesn't need to cost £128,000, despite what people in Yorkshire might tell you. It doesn't need to cost that. But what you do need to know is that your idea needs to be compelling enough to bring certain people on board, or you can do some form of structure that's going to allow them to help you in the early stages to get an MVP out so that you can validate your idea. And that's what we did. What we launched back then is totally different to what we have today. So for anyone listening, if you're not involved in tech, do not let that stop you. Some of the best ideas that have come across in the technology world today do not come from people from a technological background. And I'd like to add us to that list later down the line, inshallah. But I can tell you now, as of today, if you gave me a reference of something to do with technology, probably would have no clue what you're saying.
Oh my God, what an amazing story. It's fabulous to see that you basically have done exactly what Amazing is trying to do. You've used a community,
Yeah.
and you know you have lived and breathed your mission to the T there, and it's just amazing how you just stuck to your mission. And it was also very nice in your story how other people made you realize that when you were almost forgetting it, because it does happen, right? You're so into it, you almost forget, why am I doing this? And we do this in our 9 to 5 as well, where we get so into the detail that you're like, well, why am I doing this? Why don't I do it like that? And it sometimes it takes someone else to come along and tell you that. And I think one thing that's very clear is you're a very good listener, and I imagine for you to be a very good team player and listening to other people and taking that on board, which isn't something you always find in founders, especially, you know, I've spoken to many. So it's very nice to see that. And I can definitely see you being that team player. So that's very, very cool. Thank you for that history there behind Amazing. And I hope, inshallah, you really, really do go far. And we will go into that in a minute. But before you do, could you just give a bit of an insight? So if someone was, you know, they're hearing about Amazing for the first time, don't know why that would be, but anyway, they're hearing about it for the first time. What kind of businesses could they find on your platform?
Yeah.
And if they're a business themselves, how could they get involved with you?
Really, really good question. So types of businesses that you can find are usually service-based businesses, although it's not limited to that because it is a directory at the end of the day. You'll be able to find businesses that sell goods, go to their website, make an informed decision. But what you're typically going to find on there are providers within the wedding space, so weddings and events. So whether you're looking to find the right venue, the right caterer, makeup artists, I've learned way too much about makeup artists. I can now tell everyone more so than tech at this point. And let's say the photographer, the cake, everything you need to plan your wedding, it's there. And we know why, because our community loves big weddings, right? That's just how that works. So we saw the low hanging fruit there. And personally, I got married in 2021. I had no clue how to organize a wedding in Leicester when I'm not from there, right? So that was a big sort of driving point for us. But other sectors that you'll be able to find on there, legal. So Sharia compliant wills, solicitors from our own background where you can have a little bit more of a transparent conversation. I know it doesn't often come across that way. However, when you work within your own community, the guard can come down a little bit more. And I think that's better for any transaction. Also, you know, for example, immigration is obviously a big one within our community. But when you go onto the financial side, you're looking at halal finance in general. You know, a big one for me was halal car finance. I didn't even know that existed before having a look at some of the options that were available. Don't get me wrong, there's not loads of them, but they're out there, so we should know about them. Halal mortgages, as we know, are a really big thing. Not everyone is aware of the options that are available to them, so we like to spread that out and make that make that accessible. And also Sharia compliant. Anything Sharia compliant within the financial sector, that's what you're going to be looking for. And we are continually updating that every single day. But one that is a little bit more of a niche that I think should always be an option is even the funeral care side. You know, we don't often think about that until it becomes something that we have to think about. And we don't know at what time in our lives that is going to become applicable. So, what we are really pleased to say is we could at least help one person with that particular process moving forward. If it is not already incumbent within their own community, you know, that can be sorted. But you can find literally anything you're looking for when it comes to services, groceries, even Muslim friendly driving instructors. And we know you only find those driving instructors on WhatsApp. And even then, they might not reply. So we're trying to make this as easy as possible for everyone. But really, we look to the community to say, look, what do you want? out of the providers that you're looking for. And we get a lot of emails of people saying, I'd be really, really happy if you could add such and such category. And then it's about adding such and such category in a certain location. So there's a lot of work for us to do still, but really, the work has to be put in to make sure that users get the right value out of the directory. At the moment, we focus on, and not just primarily, but this is where you'll find a lot of the providers in London, Leicester, Birmingham, and Manchester, because they're the bigger cities and certainly where it started. However, we're looking at the more nuanced areas as well, areas that people, their postcodes might not be often thought about or certainly overlooked. And we are having an integration with a food directory, so you can find restaurants. So that will be coming hopefully in the next 12 months, probably sooner, but I'm going to give us some leeway with that one. And that's the type of businesses you'll find on the platform. Now, when it comes to businesses looking to sign up, if you believe your business is for our community, you are exactly the type of person and service provider that we want on the platform. Now, you might go on there, you might find that your category is not on there. Doesn't mean that you're not invited. It just means we've not thought big enough to make sure that you're on there right this second. But what it means is we can start making those moves to make sure we cater for that particular business category. So what we're trying to do is make sure that what's on there at the moment is the tip of the iceberg, but we heavily rely on the community to give us that feedback. So we make sure we add value to every user that comes on.
Okay, brilliant. I mean, there's so many use cases that I can think of as you were talking that we have grown to catered for over the years. I mean, I look at my childhood compared to my nieces, for example. There's so much more available, but then I look at my siblings, but there's a bit of an age gap where they didn't have things that I had. So it's definitely evolving, and I love that your platform is speeding that up because I think we really, really need that. And funerals, you know what, I think about this a lot. I know it's really morbid, but I do think about it a lot. Imagine if we lived somewhere really remote,
100%.
how would that happen? If there was no mosque nearby, and we're very fortunate to be where we are, but it shouldn't have to be reliant
No.
on fortune, right? We should have these services as far and wide as we possibly can get them. So I love it. And I think something also to point out too is it's not just a directory, it's also informing other Muslims that these things are out there. Just like you said, halal
Yeah.
financing, mortgages. People just don't know, especially people of older generation.
Yeah.
They just don't know these things are available out there for them. And it can be just as easy. You're right, there's not much of a choice sometimes, but it can be just as easy getting hold of these services. So I love that your platform is not just providing these services, but informing other Muslims that there are other options out there for you.
Well, I think as well, just coming on to that point, if you look at both business and consumer uses there, what you're relying on is Google, right? Let's be honest, Google is where everyone's putting everything through. You're relying on Google Ads to be used by the business so that it comes up nice and easily for that particular
Yeah.
person who's searching, or SEO to be really strong to make sure that the right company comes up, right? So for a lot of these businesses, I'd like to think they're ahead of the curve. They've got these sort of things in place, but let's be honest, it's hard.
Yeah.
You've got to manage your business. Then you've got to understand the marketing side, and then have enough out there to make sure people can make an informed decision. What we're doing is we're bridging that gap so that we can say, if you're a Muslim and you're looking for a particular service and it falls within our remit, this is the place you need to look at, and this is the information available to you. What we're trying to do is get rid of all of the fluff in between, because Google is so expansive and it's not for us, it's for the world. This community is perfect for Muslims, empowered for Muslims. So that's really, really what we're trying to hone in on.
Yeah, love it. Okay, can't wait to see it expand more and more. Raees, what's next for you and Ummazing? I know you gave a little bit of a reveal there.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking to expand into as many UK cities as possible. As I say, we heavily rely on user feedback, on business feedback, and not to say at the moment, like I say, we're on 5,000 monthly users, and we haven't had any ad spend at all on socials or whatever. Everything is organic. And that's done on purpose because we know that the platform as it is today, I would still call it an MVP. It's not perfect, and we know we've got a lot of work to get it to that point. Now, ROI for businesses is all about getting those inquiries in. So for us, it's all about making sure the user experience is tuned to the best ability. Can we add AI? Can we add more locations? Can we add more categories? And can we do it in a way that's going to be user friendly so that Ummazing becomes a household name for Muslims when it comes to buying and selling, and hopefully later down the line as well, more than just the directory. That is where we definitely want to get to. Certainly moving forward, we do want to see ourselves in other countries. I know when we initially launched, we had inquiries from Spain, Austria, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, those sort of areas. And that is on our roadmap for sure. But we'd like to get things right in our own backyard first, prove concept really well, and potentially give out the license later down the line for the benefit to be obtained in other countries as well. So it's all about tweaking the user experience, or optimizing, shall I say, to get it to where we believe it needs to be. And that's both on a consumer and business perspective, and really, really adding value to the everyday Muslim, whether they be a consumer or a business, inshallah.
Yeah, I love that wholesome value that we'll be adding to the community. Wonderful. Right, Raees, this is a tradition on the podcast where I ask you to give the best piece of advice that you've ever received, or your own advice that you'd like to give out to the world.
Really good question. So the best piece of advice I've ever been given, and it was actually by one of the heads of Apple back in the 80s. He told me fail early. And probably something that people have heard often, but I hadn't heard of it at the time, so it really came across like wow. But fail early in the sense of don't be afraid to fail, but also don't stick with something that's not going to work. So when I spoke earlier about make sure you get product validation and get that MVP out there, don't be scared to fail. Just make sure you learn from it and fail early, and go on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. If you look at things like Slack, for example, if you have a look at the real story behind that one, Slack was a total byproduct of what was meant to be a gaming company. They failed early, and then they moved straight into what was working. And I would say, whether you're in tech, whether you're not in tech, try it. And you have to, if you're in our community, you have to try it. There are so many good communities out there, like Islamic Makers, Dean Developers, other ones that I'm sure I've escaped my head at the moment, but you're on there. They have to create products that are not just for our community, but for the wider world as well. And do it in the sense of don't be worried to fail. Fail early, get on to the next one until it works. That would be my advice for anyone listening.
I absolutely love it. And I just want to say something to you, Raees, and because it's certainly a pattern that I've seen with people who have pure intentions. When you have pure intentions, it will work. And it's not about how, it's just it will happen. And I've seen this with so many people such as yourselves, where they put their mind to something, they've got a pure intention, and it's something that is going to help better people's lives, and they really do make it. So I'm so happy that is happening for you. I know it's been such a big journey for you, but it's wonderful to see that it's happening and it's adding so much value to people. Raees, thank you so much for being on and giving your responses and being so honest with me and sharing everything that you have. I wish you all the luck in the world, and I can't wait to see what you've got next.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.